Hi, I'm Richard Rogers, and I absolutely hope that you enjoy today's spiritual message. You know, we at Unity of Phoenix Spiritual Center are committed to helping people live better lives. We're going to provide you tools over and over, spiritual tools that allow you to live your best possible life. And if you want to leave a donation to continue to allow the work that we do to support other people just like you, we say thank you. Thank you for your generosity, because this ministry is committed to making the world a better place. All right, so this time of year, I have the advantage. Well, I guess every time of the year, I have this advantage. But I have, throughout the year, I've tried to have themes every month, you know. And the difficulty is that some of the talks that I want to do don't nicely fit into a theme. So, did you ever play cards? And you ever play, not that any of us would ever play poker, but when you play poker, the way that we used to play it was always dealer's choice. So whoever was dealing got to name the game, right? And so for the next couple of weeks, I get to pull a dealer's choice. I'm going to talk about some just stuff out of nowhere, all over the place, that doesn't have to fit into any kind of a system, because it's just my thought process unfolding. So tonight what I want to do is I want to talk about debt. Woo! I know you've been waiting for this one, right? And the question that I have for you tonight is, if you could pay off all your debt, would you be interested? If we could pay off all of our debt as a nation, would you be interested? Really? All right. So what I want to do tonight is I want to talk about debt from 2 points of view. I want to talk about it from a financial point of view, but more importantly, I want to talk about it from a spiritual point of view, because we have a lot of debt in this country. Do you know that? That we have, depending on who you talk to, somewhere north of $19 trillion as a country in debt. And do you know what that breaks down to every man, woman, and child? About $60,000. So are you ready to write your check for your share of our national debt, right? And that's does that sound like a lot to you? $60,000 for every man, woman, and child? It sounds like a lot to me, right? Until we hear how much personal debt we have, right? We have about 20 trillion in national debt, and about 12 trillion in personal debt, which only breaks down to about $40,000 for every man, woman, and child. So that means we could actually say in a real way that every man, woman, and child in this country is about $100,000 on average in debt. Now, that may not be a problem, but I don't see a lot of 5-year-olds writing a check for $100,000, right? And what's also interesting is it looks like the amount of upheaval in our world is at a time of escalation, right? If you look at the fires and the hurricanes and the floods and the shootings, it looks like upheaval is increasing. Upset, right? So I want to talk about this because I want you to actually have a system that works for you. Does that make sense? Now, if you're already hyperventilating, I promise you that I am not going to shame you, right? I just want to be in a spiritual conversation that makes a difference. Because I know that because I've been over my head in debt. I know when you're over your head in debt, it can feel like the scariest thing in the world. When I graduated from college, within a year, I was a year's salary in debt where I couldn't make the minimum payments of my life. And I know that being in debt is really scary. And yet, I think there's some tools that we can access that actually make a difference. And I want to talk about that tonight. Because as a nation, as a people, we need to be aware of this. Because after 2008, when the market crashed, personal debt was going down until last year. Until earlier this year. And earlier this year, the downward trend went from going down, like, people are getting less and less debt. And by May of this year, that turned radically, and we broke all records for the amount of personal debt as a nation. Personal debt, that means credit cards, cars, mortgages, all forms of debt. And I'm not sure in a time of upheaval if that's the best idea. Now, in a time of upheaval, would you want more debt or more cash? Right? Can you see that more cash in a time of upheaval, in times of up and downs, cash is better? Can you see that? Now, why is cash better? I mean, it's obvious, but why is cash better? Well, if you're in a time of upheaval, getting through the upheaval is easier with more money. Can we all agree with that? Right? And the second point is, as you go through the time of upheaval, on the other side of the upheaval, there's going to be some great deals. Can you right? How many, if you've lived in Arizona for any length of time, you know the real estate market in Arizona is very bumpy, right? Up and down. So after there's a time of upheaval, after there's a bump, a recession, whatever you want to call it, there are some scream of deals, right? But we actually need to be in a cash position to do that. Does that make sense? Now, let me tell you a little story about the church. When I got here in 1991, we had a little church, right, on Northern Avenue, 15th Avenue, that was completely paid off. And the church grew from 200 to about 1,400 people on a weekend. We did a Saturday night service and 3 Sunday morning services. And the place was packed. We had like little less than 3 acres, and we couldn't get any more cars in. We couldn't get any more people in. So we began to look for a new church home. Well, we had never raised $1 million in a year, right? And that church was worth about $600 and change thousand. And to put this deal for this church together, to get enough land for what we needed and everything, it was about a $4 million deal, right? And we didn't have an extra $4 million. Does that make sense? We had never raised $1 million in a year. We didn't have an extra $4 million that we could just kind of slide into that project. So we began to do all kinds of wonderful things. Because $4 million is hard to have enough bake sales for $4 million. Right? That's a whole lot of cookies to get to $4 million, right? So we began to get creative, and we leveraged ourselves to the hilt, right? And that was always one of my biggest concerns, is that there was a chance when you're that leveraged that if something went wrong, we could have lost everything. And that's the truth. We could have lost everything. We actually sold our old church before this was built. I was being very creative, right? But then we only had a year to put this deal together. And then when I stepped down as the senior minister 100 years ago, and Reverend Mirage stepped in, one of the things that I will ever be appreciative of, one of the things that he did absolutely phenomenal was pay off this church debt. And he has been an incredibly good steward for our ministry in making sure that every year we are lowering our debt, because as a ministry, the sooner we pay this off, right, the better off we are. Would you agree with that? And that's one of the reasons we're looking at doing all the things we're doing is to pay this place off. Now, the question that I have for you is, how do you know how much debt is too much debt? Like, how do you know, right? Because one of the things we read, right, is in Romans 8. Owe nothing to anyone except love one another. For as you love your neighbor, you fulfill the law. Shakespeare said it this way. Neither be a borrower or a lender in Hamlet. Right? So how do you know how much debt is appropriate to carry? Now, is anybody interested by that? I was kind of interested. I was kind of fascinated by that. And there's actually a formula that you can actually know if where you are in the process, okay? And the formula comes from the idea that if you look at your monthly debt output, and this is how much each month it costs you to make the minimum payments on your debt. Does that make sense? And that's a number, right? Right? And then what you're supposed to do is, what is your monthly income, right? And guess what that is? That's a number, right? And the idea is that there's a ratio between those two numbers. So let's just say that your income every month is $1,000, okay? And your house payment, let's say, is $250. I didn't say this is a hypothetical, all right? And then let's say your car payment is $100, right? Right? And let's say all your credit card debt, your minimum payment on all your credit card is $50. Okay? Let's just say, right? And let's say you don't owe your bookie anything, or, right? That other than this, you're good to go, right? So your total monthly output between your house, your car, and your credit cards, can anybody figure this out in their head? $400. Now, what percentage of this is to this? 40%. Do you know the magic number is 40%? That's the magic number. That over and over again, if you look at all the stuff, what you ideally want is your monthly commitments to be less than 40% of your income, right? Because so that not all your money is going into managing your debt, right? Now, does it make sense to you that in good times that it's easier to manage your debt than it is in difficult times? Does that, if more money is coming in, is it easier to manage your debt? Now, one of the things that happens is in the good times, we always think that the good times are going to what? Last for not only for a week or a month or a year, but we think the good times are going to last forever, right? And because we're optimistic, spiritual, positive people, we're actually convinced that the good times are going to last forever. True? Do the good times last forever? No. Does the party ever end? Yes. No matter how great the party is, the sun eventually comes up. Right? And that's your sign that you should have gone home hours ago. Right? Now, if we go to Scripture, right? Behold, this is Joseph's dream from Genesis 40. Behold, 7 years of great abundance will come on to the land of Egypt. And after that, 7 years of famine will come, and all the abundance will be forgotten in the land of Egypt. And the famine will rage in the land, so the abundance will be unknown in the land because of the subsequent famine will be so severe. Now, does that sound happy? No, but if you know that there are ups and downs, you actually know that there's going to be ups and downs. True? You know it. And if you know that there's going to be ups and downs, you can actually position yourself in a way that you can actually move in to the greatest level of good for you, for your family, for your community, for your world, because you're actually prepared for both the good times and the hard times. Because in the good times and the hard times, is God still present? Yes. God is still present. But we have to have the wisdom to position ourselves in a place that we are good, right? So what do you think the number one thing that determines this? What determines your monthly debt output? You, right. Right? That's genius, right? It's genius. When you go shopping and buy something on your credit card, nobody made you do that. True? Nobody had you have to go get that outfit. Right? You actually need to go buy that car. Now, there are things that you need. Like when it comes to food, there are things that you need, like a place to live and a place to be warm or cold in the summertime. There's things that are non-negotiable, but a lot of things are 100% negotiable, right? And that we actually have the choice how we create what's next. Is that true? Let me read you another quote. Interest never sleeps nor sickens or dies. It never goes to the hospital. It works on Sundays and holidays. It never takes a vacation. It never rests or travels. It takes no pleasure. It's never laid off of work or discharged from employment. It never reduces its hours or has a short crop or drought. It never pays taxes or has to buy food or wears clothes or is unhoused. Once in debt, interest is our constant companion. Every minute of the day and night, you cannot shun it, slip it away. You cannot dismiss it. You cannot yield even to other entities. Its demands, its orders, whenever you come across its course or fail to meet its demands, it crushes you. Wow! Right? So now, is there a positive side to that? Now, how many want to say there's nothing positive in that? So when you're in debt, is interest working in your favor? If you're out of debt, does interest work in your favor? Well, it used to, right? Not at 2% or 1.5, right? But what I want you to see is that when you're actually, do you know that most corporations right now are cash heavy? Most corporations right now have historical amounts of cash on the side right now. Why is that? I don't know, right? Because they want to be in a cash-rich position right now because they're not sure what's going to happen next. And they want to make sure that there are reserves to make sure that their organization survives. Who's in charge of your organization? I am. I mean, not your, but I'm in charge of my own. Right? So what if tonight you were willing to look at both the spiritual and the financial aspects of debt and begin to move yourself to a more cash-rich position? Because even paying off a little bit of debt right now, is that a good thing or a bad thing? I think it's a good thing. I think the more debt we can pay off right now, the more we get ourselves debt-free right now, the better position we're going to be in. And so even if we begin to take little steps, we are actually going to move our life into a higher level of freedom. Because over and over again, what I want you to do is to be free. Now, one of the things that sometimes happens when you get people out of debt, believe it or not, is they get right back into it. Right? And so that's a little confusing, right? So if you think that if you worked really hard to help somebody get out of debt, you would think that they would actually want to stay out of debt, right? But without a vision of where you're going, there's lots of cool stuff at the mall. Does that make sense? And that outfit looks so great. If you don't have a vision that's bigger than an outfit, the outfit wins every time. You know, or if it's a new stereo or a new TV or a new PlayStation or whatever it is, all that stuff looks really attractive if you don't have a vision that's bigger than that. And what I want you to see tonight is that I want you to have a vision of a possibility for your life where you're actually building wealth, where you're actually building abundance for you and for your family, where you're actually making a commitment to make new financial choices that actually make your life easier and that you get to live a more abundant life. So you ready for the how-to? Okay, let's get to the how-to. First, from the spiritual point of view, I want you to write down on a piece of paper everybody that you owe. Now, this isn't necessarily debt, but it is every individual that you feel like you owe something to from a spiritual, emotional point of view. The first time I did this exercise, I shared with you there was a time right out of college where I was a year's salary in debt, and I began to do this exercise. And what I realized is one of the people I felt like I'd owe was a friend of mine named Mark. Mark had a beautiful 69 Mustang that had been completely restored. And one night a bunch of guys were all in his car, and I put my elbow through his headliner. You know what a headliner is? It's the fabric on the inside. And I felt awful. And I didn't believe at the time that I could actually afford to replace his headliner. So I apologized, but I didn't do anything about it. And I felt like I owed him. So as I was cleaning up my life, I called Mark and said, Mark, I feel really bad. It's been years. I want to take care of your headliner. And he said, Richard, don't be, I've had 3 kids since then. He said, if you replace the headliner in my car, it would be the only thing that's still restored. Right? I mean, he's so gracious. And he was so gracious. How did it make me feel? It made me feel great. It made me feel forgiven. I felt like that was one of the things that I could cross off my list that I no longer owed. So what I want you to begin to look at is 2 things. Who are the people that you feel like you owe, and who are the people that you believe still owe you? And what I find over and over again is that if we have debt, we also have an owe list. So who do you owe? And who do you feel like owes you? And I want you to really just begin to hold both those lists. I want you to tell yourself the truth. And I want you just for a week or so, just look at those lists. And if you say, well, I don't really know a dollar figure how much I really feel like that I owe them, make one up. How much do you think it would cost to fix that or do that? Just make it up. So that you get to actually see who you believe you owe and who you believe still owes you. Because what happens as we move through life is we're still keeping track. If you told yourself the truth, you could probably come up with a list of people from your first employer or your ex-spouse or whoever it is that you think owed you and that took advantage of you or robbed you or cheated you that you've been holding on to. And I would like you to suggest tonight that I want you to have an owe list, both who you owe and who you think owes you. And I want you to get really clear about that. And when you're ready, I want you to be willing to forgive all debts. I forgive all debts, and all debts are forgiven of me. Will you say that with me? I forgive all debts, and all debts are forgiven of me. Now, do you ever have to forgive all debts? No. You have a God-given right to be as miserable for as long as you want to be miserable. Right? You have a God-given right to count every nickel, quarter, penny, story, drama. You can hold on to that story about how that person did you wrong. And you're right, they did do you wrong. They did. They took it. They stole it. They used it. They abused it. Right? You're 100% right about that. But as long as you keep holding on to it, do you ever look to God to really bless you because you're got to prove that that person needs to pay up so that you get it right and they get it right? I forgive all debts, and all debts are forgiven of me. Together? I forgive all debts, and all debts are forgiven of me. And what I find over and over again, that when we're willing to take this spiritual step, the financial step gets much easier. Because what do we teach over and over again? That the inside creates the outside. If you're not willing to do the inner work, then you have to make sure that every penny is covered out there. Right? Because as we hold on internally, it also blocks the flow of God blessing us. Let's say it one more time, just for grins. I forgive all debts, and all debts are forgiven of me. Okay, are you ready to move on? Now, one of the premises that I live by is this idea that out of all that I get, the first 10% goes to God or where I'm spiritually fed. The next 10 goes to me. And this isn't me for a new car, me for a vacation. It goes to me for long term, to build wealth, to retire, to build whatever you call your nest egg, right? So what does that leave behind? 80%. So the 80% is for us to live on. True? Right? Does that make sense? Okay. Now, when we have debt, what I want you to begin to do is I want you to make a list of all your debt, right? And I want you to make a list of what the debt is, who it is, how much it is, and what's the monthly cost. Okay? Does that make sense? Who the debt to, how much the debt is, to the penny. Now, you might have to bring a friend over for this one. Right? Because sometimes when we actually see how much debt we have, it sends us into a little bit of a conniption. That, again, is a spiritual term. Right? So at this point, you might need a loving friend to come in beside you and say, just breathe into this. It's okay. We can write this down. Right? And so what you're going to do then is just list all the debt. Who's it to, how much, and what's the monthly cost? Now we're going to talk about how to pay it off. You ready? Because this is where it gets fun. It's called the snowball effect, right? So you're going to then prioritize your debt by the smallest debt at the top. Okay? So the smallest debt, say it's to Bob, right? And let's say however much it is, it's the smallest one. Let's say it's $20. And the monthly cost is $4. Don't laugh. That's how much it costs when you have debt. Have you ever looked at your credit card? When you pay the minimum payment, how much is actually going to pay out principal and how much is going to interest? So we've got $20 worth of debt, and it's a $4 cost. So you list them all down. Now, normally I would say that this 10% is 100% for you, for your long-term well-being. But if you have debt, and if you want to get out of debt, I would suggest we do a 5 and 5. So 5% goes to you, and 5%, the next, that 5%, whatever it is, plus your $4, the 5% goes to pay off Bob. Does that make sense? Right? So this is Bob, $4 plus the 5% of all of our income in the month. And then we have all the list. And your car is here. Your house is here. All your debt. Your bookie is here. They're all there, right? So all your debts are here. So every time one is paid off, right, you go to the next one. And it's based on the smallest to largest. So if your next one is your car, whatever it is, then you would take this $20 plus, what did we say the car was? $100 plus the $100 plus the 5%. Right? Because this one's now paid off, paid in full. Right? Can you see how it really is a snowball? Can you begin to see how every time you knock one off, the next one gets easier and easier and easier because you're actually using your resources in a very focused way to set yourself free. Now, when it comes to your car, some people lease. Is that a debt? I'd like to say yes. Now, I know you're going to expense it, but you can decide, right? And if you want to debate and talk to your financial planner, talk to your people, talk to whoever you talk to. But here's the deal. I want you out of debt. I want you to be free. I don't want you to have to worry when things are going sideways, financially, what you're going to do. Right? That sometimes we get excited and we think that spending more demonstrates that we have faith in God. But sometimes spending more just gets us up over our head. You know, one of the things I'm the most grateful for, is when it came time for Jill and I to buy a house in Arizona, we went and talked to a mortgage banker about how much we could bet, and they gave us a figure. On the way home, Jill said, I will never, we're not spending that much on a house. And she gave me a number that was half that, less than half of that. And I said, baby, we're going to be living in a box. And she said, I think we can do it. And I said, I trust me, we're going to be living in a box. And of course, we found a great little house. It's fabulous. And because of all the things that we've been through in the last few years, we're paying this thing off at a record rate, and it's going to be free and clear before we know it. And here's the deal. If you want to be in debt, great. Because I'm not here to tell you what to do. But I am here to do what I can do to set you free. And I don't want one person not able to sleep tonight or tomorrow or next month or next year because we thought it was being faithful to think that God was going to help us beyond our means instead of just living in a life that was easy and stable and fabulous. So tonight, are you willing to forgive everyone that you believe owes you anything? And are you willing to forgive yourself for any debt that you have? That you get to be set free. That you get to live a rich, wonderful, abundant life, not by overspending, but by knowing the grace of God. You with me? So here's your homework. So I want you to go home tonight, and you don't have to do it tonight. You can think about it and panic and pace all night. I want you to make a list of all your debt. I do. And I want you to make a list of all the people that you feel like you owe, and I want you to make a list of all the people that you feel owe you. And I want you to come at this from both directions. I want you to come at it from a spiritual point of view, and I want you to come at it from a financial point of view. I want you to set yourself free. First spiritually, and then financially. Because I know that as you begin to move in this direction, when you make a commitment to be financially free, when you make a commitment to actually pay off all your debts, the universe steps in and opens doors in ways that you couldn't even imagine now. But until you make the commitment to be financially free and debt-free, it'll never happen. And that for some of us, this is kind of like cleaning out our garage. We think we're going to get there eventually, and our garage just seems to get more and more blessed. I am free of all debt. Will you say that with me? I am free of all debt. One more time like we actually mean it. I am free of all debt. God sets me free of all debt. Together. God sets me free of all debt. God in me is greater than all debt. Together, God in me is greater than all debt. Let's pray. And I invite you to open your mind, your heart, your soul to the activity of God that is right here, right now. That there is only one presence and one power. And God is infinite. And we channel that infinite spirit and power of God to set us free financially at every level of our being. That we're free. We forgive all the stories. We forgive all the drama. We forgive anyone that we think owes us, and we forgive ourselves for anything that we feel like we owe someone else. And we clear the deck. So the infinite abundance of God blesses us in amazing ways. In the name and through the power of the living Christ, we give thanks. And so it is. Amen. God bless you all. Have a great week.